You're listening to the Mindful Mama Podcast, episode 100. Woohoo! Oh my gosh. Today we're talking about mindful discipline and kindness. Welcome to the Mindful Mama Podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you are thriving, when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. And this is a very special episode, and I'm still your host, Hunter Clark-Fields, Mindful Mama Mentor, and I do coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in daily life, and I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over the 20 years, and I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I'm the mom of two girls ages 7 and 10, who you are going to hear at the end of this episode in a very real moment from our very real snow delay day. Again. But this is the 100th episode, so this is a really special episode. If you are new, welcome. This is going to be a little bit of an unusual episode, although we have interviews, we have solo podcasts, just learning and teaching and talking, and this is a very special interview today. And we're also going to hear from a couple of other people kind of sprinkled throughout this podcast as well. So if you get to the end and you're normally one of those people, the interview's over, I'm just going to end the whole thing, hang on today because there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a few funny and interesting little tidbits added into this very special episode. 100 episodes! I can't believe it. So before I dive into, I just want to thank you guys. But before I dive into that, I want to quick tell you who our very special interview is with. I wanted to choose someone special for the 100th episode. And today I'm talking to Shauna Shapiro. And I want to have Shauna on again because she is amazing. She's a professor, an author. She's an internationally recognized expert in mindfulness and compassion. She's published over 100 journal articles, book chapters, etc. And she has co-authored the books, The Art and Science of Mindfulness and Mindful Discipline. And her 2017 TEDx talk is rated as one of the top 10 TED Talks on mindfulness. So it's really a powerful, powerful interview. I could have talked to her for hours. We talk about what you practice grows stronger and how shame actually prevents us from making changes that we want to make. And she talks about the science of that. It's so cool. And talking about, in parenting, about this idea of sovereignty. We'll get to hear more about this and how to hold our boundaries and keep a soft heart, which I love is so, so cool. So I can't wait for you to hear this conversation with Shauna. It is so good. But before we do, on this special 100th episode, I want to give a shout out to my listeners. We have had well over 50,000 downloads so far, and it's growing, and our audience is all around the world. It's really pretty exciting. So most people are in the United States, and yay. And we have lots of wonderful folks in Canada who I've certainly talked to quite a bit. And I want to give a shout out to my people in Mexico. So we've got our North America kind of represented, but also kind of surprisingly, we've got one listener down in the Dominican Republic. Hey, mama. We've got 19 people in Chile. So great. Shout out to you in Chile. We've got some 42 Icelanders. Yay, Iceland. Rock on. Rock on. Glad to have you here. And then we've got people in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and also in Europe and the UK. I'm so glad you guys are here. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We have got listeners in South Africa as well as Saudi Arabia. So awesome. I'm so glad that you're here. And we have a good contingent over in India too. Hey, my Indian mamas. So glad you're here too. As well as Japan. We've got a good big old group in Japan. And hey, Let's get together. I love this. I want to come to Japan. Let's do a retreat there. So cool. And then our biggest contingent outside the US, even bigger than Canada, are the mamas in Australia. Yay! Rock on to my Australian mamas. Shout out to you guys down under. It's like 2 degrees up here. It's probably, and I heard yesterday it was like 117 degrees down there. So hope you're staying cool while I'm warming up, and as well as my New Zealand mamas, who some of them I know very personally. Great shout out to you guys. So you are part of a diverse group of people all around the world listening to the Mindful Mama podcast. And so I really, really appreciate you. I love that we can connect every week. I love getting your reviews and your notes. It's awesome. Thanks so much to the Abigail Thomas Photography for your 5-star review on iTunes. She said that your podcast has empowered me to take back control of my zoo and bring some peace back into our lives by teaching my children that their mind is in control of their actions. Thank you. Thank you. That's so awesome. I mean, this podcast can have this ripple effect is amazing and powerful. And that's what really, really fuels me. So thank you. Thank you so much. It makes a huge difference. You guys rock. Rock on the Mindful Mama tribe. And while we're talking about the tribe, I just want to give a shout out here on this 100th episode to a reminder that as you're listening, you're here, you're with us, and you can be part of this. So I'm just going to share briefly the Mindful Mama Manifesto. And if this resonates with you, let me know, because this is the work. This is what I'm really passionate about. So here we go. A mindful mama is a new generation of mother, present, evolving, calm, authentic, and free. Mindful mamas reject the culture of not good enough, knowing that when we free ourselves from stress and limiting stories, our authentic, peaceful nature shines through. Mindful mamas practice self-compassion and see their challenges as teachers, not flaws. A mindful mama values wisdom over reactivity, empathy over obedience, and begins anew every day. Mindful mamas live what we want our kids to learn, knowing that the best parenting is in modeling. Mindful mamas go within and get quiet to access their power. Mindful mamas practice presence, create their experience, embrace imperfection, love themselves. Mindful mamas are motivated, knowing that with every step, they are changing things for the generations that follow. I am a mindful mama, and I hope you are too. So we're going to get to that interview with Shauna right after this very lovely message from a great supporter that you might recognize.
Hello, Hunter and listeners of the Mindful Mama podcast. I am Anna Seawald, the host of the Authentic Moments podcast, and I just want to say congratulations, Hunter, on reaching this big milestone in podcasting. Yay, 100th episode. I have just celebrated several weeks ago my 100th episode, and I know what goes into producing and creating a podcast. So thank you for putting out this show in the podcasting world. I am a listener, I was a guest, and I support your work. I love your authenticity. I love your laughter, your sense of humor, your interest in deep conversations, and you just have a pure, genuine curiosity about people. And I love what you do. I regularly listen to your show, and I know some of my listeners listen to your show. So we share a listenership. Yay! And I want to wish you lots of luck and success in the coming episodes. I would love for you to come to my show again. You've been a guest twice, and I have met you in real life, and I want to let listeners know that you are as genuine, as real as you do sound on the podcast. I am excited to be your friend. I support your work and wish you lots of good luck. Keep doing the work that you're doing. I love the show. It's much needed. It gives a lot of hope, inspiration, and practical tools to the overwhelmed moms out there. So yay for the 100th episode.
Anna, thank you so much. You are amazing. And listeners, I want to let you know that Anna is going to be my special guest speaker at the spring retreat day-long retreat that I'm holding at the elegant and lovely and beautiful Winterthur Museum and Country Estate. And that will be on April 14th. And we should have the page for registration up when this podcast goes out. So go to mindfulmamamentor.com and check it out. Come meet me in person. Give me a hug. I want to talk to you and hear about your experiences and connect. This retreat is limited, so make sure you register soon. Okay, so you've waited for it. I'm so excited for you to hear Shauna Shapiro. She's amazing, and you are going to get so much out of this. So on to this discussion. So welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast, Shauna. I'm so glad you could be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I love your TED Talk, and I'm loving mindful discipline. And we know that you're the author of a few books, but in your TED Talk, you talk about a moment where you face, you're in the monastery and you've gone to study mindfulness as a young person, and you face a moment of judgment. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was a very important moment. So I didn't know much about meditation when I went to Thailand, and I went to this monastery where the monks didn't speak much English and I didn't speak any Thai. And I kind of understood that mindfulness and meditation were about paying attention in the present moment. And my only instruction for the meditation was to feel my breath going in and out of my nose as a way to anchor my attention in the present moment. So as I began practicing, what I noticed, as all of us notice, is that my mind kept wandering off. And no matter how hard I tried, it just kept wandering. And I started to really judge myself, as you shared. I started to feel like I was terrible at meditation, that I was a fake, that I shouldn't have come there. And luckily, a monk who did speak English arrived from England. And as I shared with him my struggles and my challenges, he looked at me and he said, "Oh dear, you're not practicing mindfulness. You're practicing judgment, impatience, frustration." And then he said 5 words that I've never forgotten. He said, "What you practice grows stronger. What you practice grows stronger." Mm-hmm. And we know this now with neuroplasticity, right? Our repeated experiences shape our brain. So if I'm sitting there and I'm meditating with judgment, I'm growing the neural pathway of judgment. Right? If I'm meditating with frustration, I'm growing frustration. So he helped me understand that mindfulness isn't just about paying attention. It's about how we pay attention. Paying attention with kindness, with warmth, with curiosity, so that mindfulness really becomes these loving arms that welcome all of our experience, even the messy, difficult ones.
Yeah. And you also talk about the idea of, this idea of kind attention for many people here in the United States and in the Western world and the developed countries. I feel like we have an anchor in some hardcore judgment, right? Our history is really anchored in some judgment. And so it's really challenging for people to gather that this idea of kind attention. And can you talk a little bit to us about what is the problem with our shaming and our blaming ourselves, and what happens to the brain on shame?
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with you. It is so culturally unacceptable to be kind to ourselves. It feels soft and self-indulgent, and we feel that the only way that we can really make changes is to shame ourselves, judge ourselves, push ourselves. And to be truthful, I have followed that line of thinking myself many times. And so I was really excited to learn about the research of what shame does to the brain, because I feel like it will help people recognize that this is not a helpful pathway. It doesn't actually lead to change. So when we feel shame, the centers of the brain that have to do with learning and growth shut down. Shame literally robs us of the energy we need to do the work of changing. And what literally happens when we feel shamed is we have this kind of cascade of norepinephrine and cortisol flood our system, and our resources are shuttled away from the learning centers of the brain and to survival pathways. So shame literally prevents us from making the very changes that we are hoping to make.
Mm.
And when I learned this, that shame doesn't work, it felt like this is a message that I need to share with the world, because we have this kind of completely paradoxical understanding of self-compassion versus shame. And we think that if we're tough, if we're tiger moms, if we have grit and we just push through, that's the way to succeed. And what I'm learning through the science as well as through the meditation practice is that a more yielding, accepting, kind approach can actually be even more effective. Mm-hmm. And it's so surprising, but the science has demonstrated that.
And you must have seen this in your own life. I'm wondering, so you had this judgment, you're in this monastery having this judgment, you wanted to make changes in your life, right? You were in this monastery. And I'm wondering about that level of, grit, make it happen, I will just push myself kind of stuff in your own life versus this idea of kind attention and self-compassion in your own life.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. And it really, it touches my heart, because clearly this is something I struggle with in my own life. And it's why I study it. And it's why I feel like I can teach it so authentically, is because I get it. Mm-hmm. I have and continue to judge myself very harshly. And what I'm really learning is, even in those moments when I catch myself, instead of judging myself and being like, oh, Shauna, I can't believe you're doing it again, this doesn't work, to in that very moment hold myself with compassion. In that very moment say, yes, it's okay to be imperfect. And it's okay to be imperfect and catch yourself and judge yourself and then catch yourself again and be compassionate. That it's never too late to be kind. And we can begin again in any moment. And for me, it's such a hopeful message that transformation is possible for all of us, no matter what, in any moment. And I think that for me, I felt that during the meditation practice. I felt real faith, but there's also something wonderful about having the science back it up. And so for me, it's the weaving together of these two that is the greatest support.
Wow. I love that, because that's what my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh is who I've studied and practiced with in my life. And he talks about every moment, every breath is a moment to begin anew, is a moment of new beginning. And I love that you're saying this transformation is possible for all of us, no matter what, in any moment. And science backs that up. I love that. So how does science back that up? Tell us just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so a lot of different pathways we can look at. So first, science teaches us about neuroplasticity, and it shows us that the brain is changing all the time, that it's not static and fixed. And so in any moment, we can practice what we want to grow. And this, this kind of, the reason this is so hopeful in terms of our own happiness and well-being is that in psychology, there used to be this idea that we couldn't really change, and that it was based on the idea that there's a happiness set point. Mm-hmm. And just like we have a weight set point, you're going to be a certain weight.
Yeah, I've heard that.
There's a happiness set point, and this is based on decades of research, very accurate, showing that if you win the lottery, you have this blip of happiness, of course, but then 1 year later, you go back to your baseline level, wherever you started. Didn't matter that you won the lottery.
Yeah.
Even more surprising is that if you're in a terrible accident and you become a quadriplegic, you have this, very steep dive into depression, but 1 year later, you're back to baseline. So this is great news if you're born happy, right? Like you get an accident, you get divorced, you pop back up. But it's not such good news if you weren't born happy. And then it's like, wait a minute, if I win the lottery, if I marry the perfect person, if I get that house in Hawaii, 1 year later, I'm going to be back to this depression. And so what's so hopeful about this research in mindfulness is it's showing, and neuroplasticity, is it's showing that changing the exterior circumstances doesn't change our happiness levels, but changing our interior environment, changing our brain actually can. And so happiness can be trained because the very structure of our brain can be modified.
Wow. It's amazing. And so have you seen this in your own life and your research? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Right. So there's a lot of research studies. Some of the most famous ones were done at Harvard University by Sarah Lazar. And there's another wonderful study done by Richie Davidson and John Kabat-Zinn, just showing the impact on both the structural and the structural changes and the activity changes in the brain, in certain parts of the brain that have to do with happiness and well-being and optimism and alertness. The more people practice meditation, the greater these changes are. And you can see them. What happens is the brain actually grows. It's like going to the gym and you lift weights. Your muscle gets bigger. When you practice meditation, the part of the brain that has to do with attention, compassion, learning, memory grows bigger and stronger. It's called cortical thickening, the growth of new neurons in response to this repeated practice.
And it's about that practicing with kind attention. It's not just about being, it's not just solely about being present. It's about being present with a sense of kind attention, with that sense of being able to begin anew at any moment. You also talk about in that talk, which is amazing. You guys, I'll link to it in the show notes for sure, is a loving practice that was given to you by a meditation teacher. And I was wondering if you could share that with the listener.
Absolutely. And just to follow up on what you're saying about kind attention, and you'll hear this in my story, is I was a little skeptical at first about kind attention. It felt really soft. And I had really gone into this practice like with some urgency and dedication. And I was like, I want to be kind of a fierce meditation practitioner. And I don't want to be like a soft new age hippie. I'm not into that stuff. And so what I've learned about kindness, which is just fascinating, is that kindness, along with any positive emotion, releases dopamine into the system. And it actually turns on the learning centers of the brain. It actually gives us the resources we need to change. And so again, it's counterintuitive. We think we have to push harder, judge ourselves, shame ourselves, but actually being kind to ourselves doesn't let us off the hook. What it does is it activates us for change. Wow. So the story is that when I was going through my divorce, which was very, very painful, especially because we had a young son together, my meditation teacher saw how much judgment I was having towards myself. I'd wake up every morning with this kind of pit of shame and why couldn't I make it work? And am I destroying my life? And, worse, am I destroying my son's life? And she suggested an explicit practice of kind attention. She said, when you wake up in the morning, I'd like you to say, I love you, Shauna. And I looked at her and just kind of shook my head. No way. And, she to her credit, she recognized I was not there yet. And so she said, fine, how about just saying, good morning, Shauna? Can you handle that? She said, just that basic kindness of greeting yourself. And she said, and try putting your hand on your heart when you say it. It releases oxytocin. It's good for you. So she kind of knew the science would win me over. So the next day I took a breath, put my hand on my heart. Good morning, Shauna. And it was kind of nice, instead of that avalanche of shame and fear and what am I going to do, future worry thoughts. I just said good morning. And I started doing it every day. And about a month later, I saw her and I thanked her. I said, that was great. Thank you. She looked at me with this kind of twinkle in her eye and she said, all right, you've graduated. Now the advanced practice, which, as you know, is good morning. I love you, Shauna. So the next morning, woke up, hand on heart, took a breath. Good morning. I love you, Shauna. I felt nothing, a little embarrassed, but not love. But I kept practicing because, as we know, what you practice grows stronger. And a few months later, I remember it so clearly because it was my birthday and it was my first birthday without my son, without my husband. And I was alone. And I woke up in the morning and put my hand on my heart. Good morning. I love you, Shauna. And I felt it. I felt my grandmother's love. I felt my mother's love. I felt my own self-love.
Oh, wow.
And, I wish I could tell you every day since then has been this miracle of love. And I've never judged myself. And we all know that's not true. But what's been extraordinary is that pathway of self-kindness has been established in me. And I feel it growing stronger. And I feel it coming out in unexpected ways at unexpected times. In fact, just recently, and this so touched me because it was so small, but I was teaching a meditation retreat at the new 1440 Multiversity in Santa Cruz. And they have this really beautiful but very heavy furniture. And I was trying to move this desk, and I moved it and I dropped it right on my toe. And I was already like kind of late for class. And I was like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And you're already late. My toe's like spurting blood. And then I was like, oh, sweetheart, ouch, that really hurt. And so instead of going down the judgmental pathway of like, you don't have time for this and you're so clumsy, I actually stopped to comfort myself. And it makes me a little sad to even acknowledge that isn't natural. But I had this moment of real joy where I was like, wow, this practice works. Like, here I am being kind to myself the way I would treat my dear friend, instead of judging myself for being, making a mistake or being clumsy. And so what I'd say is that, it's not a cure-all and it's not perfect. And I still feel plenty of doubt in myself and self-judgment, but there's more kindness. And I truly believe that I'm moving in the direction of even more kindness. And that's really all we can do, is set that intention, set the compass of our hearts in that direction. I want to be more kind to myself. I want to be more kind to other people. I want to be a better mother, whatever that means, while still, appreciating what I am doing.
Yeah. Yeah. What you practice grows stronger. Shauna, I mean, this touches my heart so deeply, because I work with women and I teach mindful parenting. I work with mothers, and this is the heart of all the work that we do, because this is the foundation in so many ways, is the self-compassion and mindfulness, because there's so much harshness where we hold so much harshness for ourselves. It's such an epidemic. It really makes me incredibly sad for all of us that we have so much suffering and that we inflict so much upon ourselves. It really is amazing. And you sharing your story and opening up in such a very honest and real way, backed by all this then research, is very powerful. And I'm like, have goosebumps.
Oh, I really appreciate you saying that. And I do agree. I think it's kind of the modern epidemic is this self-loathing and this self-shame and this self-doubt. And what's interesting is a lot of people say, well, if people are kind to themselves, aren't they just going to be like self-indulgent, and aren't we becoming this entitled culture? And yes, I think there's a problem with that, but I don't think it's coming because of kindness. I think it's from our isolation. Mm-hmm. And we're all feeling so disconnected and so separate that then we try harder to kind of get our needs met, or we have this kind of, lack of empathy. And I think when we start soothing ourselves and being kind to ourselves and holding ourselves, then this natural kindness starts to exude. And we start to recognize that, what Kristen Neff, who's a dear friend, she talks about common humanity, that one element of self-compassion is common humanity, the recognition that you're not the only person who's hurting. You're not the only person who feels like she's messed up being a mom 1,000 times. You're not alone in this suffering, and to share this tenderness and this vulnerability and this authenticity, and then not just to share it so that you're not alone, but also to wish those other people well.
Yeah.
I remember when I would be nursing my son, and it would be like 4 a.m, and I'd be so tired and, tired to the point where you just like feel like you're going to throw up. And I remember feeling all alone. I'd be sitting in my rocking chair nursing him, and his dad would be sleeping, and I'd be all alone in this cold, dark house. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that there was millions of mothers in that very moment alone in their homes nursing. And I felt kind of our collective exhaustion and our collective loneliness. And I started sending out loving kindness to them and to myself, kind of taking care of myself and also taking care of them. And I felt so connected. And so I think this kindness doesn't just stay with ourselves. When we start to apply it to ourselves, it just naturally starts to spread out.
Yes. And that naturally, I love that you segue into parenting, because you wrote Mindful Discipline with Chris White. And I love this book. I think it's amazing. Think everyone should go out and get it. It's Wonderful. And you talk in Mindful Discipline about the middle path between authoritarian and permissive styles of parenting. And I think that it's something that people don't have a lot of understanding about. And it's really challenging because many of us grew up in a style of parenting that was either most people with authoritarian and sometimes permissive parenting. How were you parented? How were you raised? And now this approach that you have taken, I'm assuming you're taking with your son, and you've talked about in mindful parenting, is that different?
Yeah, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me how I was parented. My parents are pretty extraordinary people, and I feel really lucky. I would say my father was held the line of boundaries and discipline, but in a loving way, but sometimes a little authoritarian, where I felt a bit controlled and maybe pushed back. And my mom maybe erred on the side of permissiveness. But I'd say along the continuum, they really held a balance and were incredibly loving, supportive, wise parents. So I feel really graced and lucky in that regard. For me, it's been more challenging, I think in part because I divorced when my son was so young. His father had taken more of the authoritarian role and I was more permissive. And what happened, and actually the reason I wrote the book, is I was struggling. And by the time my son was 5 years old, he was kind of this little dictator in our household. And he called shots, he like came up to my knees, but he was in charge. And I had this idea in my head that to be a loving mother, I had to be soft and like permissive and kind of coddling him. And when I started talking about this with our pediatrician, Chris White, who my co-author actually was, who delivered Jackson and held him in the hospital. He didn't deliver him, but he was there holding him in the hospital the next morning. And, he's been with us since the very beginning. And he's the one who introduced me to this idea of a loving hierarchy. And it was just genius for me to recognize that I could be in my sovereignty, in my power, in my strength with my son, and still let him know I loved him. And in fact, even make him feel more safe and more loved, because I was holding a boundary to protect him. And so for me, it's like, how can you come from this very rooted, grounded strength place and keep the love alive? Don't shut your heart down. Keep a soft heart. We talk a lot about a soft heart in the book, where, sometimes you get mad at your child and you're like, you're not allowed to do that. Or you set a boundary, but it's out of anger. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I love you so much. It's time to go to bed, right? It's not, and I know the difference in me. Sometimes I'm just exhausted and I know I have a book chapter to finish and I know I have to pack his lunch. I'm like, Jackson, go to bed. And I'm not creating a boundary with him for his own well-being. It's coming out of my agitation. But if I can soothe myself, then I can tell him from a loving place, sweetheart, we're going to bed now because I love you. And he feels how true that is, and he doesn't resist.
Yeah. And how you talk in the book about the responsive brain versus the reactive brain. And I think this is what we want as mindful mamas, is we want to, get to this place where we are more responsive and less reactive. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. Breathe and pause as much as you can. There's something about being a mother, especially for me, where it triggers me just beyond anything, it's extraordinary. And what I'm learning is that the slower I go, the more I can stay connected to my truth and to my heart. And that when I'm in reactivity, nothing good is going to come out of it. And in fact, I've even told my son, Dr. Dan Siegel has that wonderful model of the brain using his fist. And he shows how the reptilian brain and then the fingers form over the fist to form the prefrontal cortex. And he says, when you flip your lid, the prefrontal cortex becomes dysregulated. It's no longer connected to the rest of the brain. And so you're functioning out of, basically a reptilian brain. And you no longer have this higher order reasoning. And so what I would say to my son when we'd start to have fights is like, mommy's flipped her lid. We now have 2 5-year-olds going at this. It's not going to happen. And so I would take lots of space or timeouts for myself where I said, I need to go. I'll set a timer for 5 minutes and I just need to breathe and calm down so that I can bring my best self back to you. And so instead of making him have timeouts, which I think can, be very challenging and harmful, I would express my timeouts. And the other thing that I recognized in myself is that, and again, this comes back to the kindness and the self-compassion. If I wasn't taking good care of myself, if I was stretched thin, that's where I'd break, is with my son. And so, you think, oh, it's okay if I do one more interview or one more book chapter or one more talk, and you can usually pull it off. But then what I notice is I come home and I'm not my best self for my son. So my students are getting my best self, and so I've had to really and continue to find that balance of how can I give my gifts in the world and really contribute in a way that I know is my purpose, and still, be a healthy human being and a mindful mama for my boy.
Yes. And squeezing a podcast interview in before you pick him up. I love
exactly.
That. Yeah, exactly.
And you can feel, right? You feel that tension, and I feel it closes my heart in a way that I don't want to live like that. Yeah. And I don't want to model that for other women, where it's like, yeah, I can do everything, because we can't. And we need to choose, and we need to choose gracefully. And it's a learning. It's I have a 12-year-old now, and I feel like I'm still learning every single day.
Yeah. It's a process. I have a personal mantra that is, thou shalt not squeeze. That's what I work with too, as well. I love that. So I want to honor your time. I love talking to you, Shauna. I could talk to you for a while, but you talk about, and I wanted to bring this up, especially in the book, but you write, you talked about the idea of unconditional love versus conditional love. And I think that all of us think that, we love our kids unconditionally, but unfortunately we send them the message that we don't. And you communicate that really well here. You say, if we instead communicate to our little ones, I will only respond to you when you're sweet or nice, or when you settle down, are not crying, or are not angry, then they begin to distrust themselves and their inner world of motivation and emotion. This leads to a loss of basic trust in reality and the natural movements of their own feelings. Wow. So tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah. And again, it touches something in my heart hearing those words, because of course I wrote them, and yet I can't always live them. And one of the biggest learnings for me was, often when my son was quiet and playing by himself and being a sweetheart, I actually would take that time to go and do work. Cause I'm like, oh, thank God I had a little bit of play. And one of the things that Chris really taught me was, when your child is in those softer places, that's a wonderful time to give them attention before they even need it, to kind of shower them with this loving attention so you fill them up. And so that doesn't directly address the unconditional love thing, which I'll touch on next, but I think that piece is really important just as a starter piece too, so that there's these you're filling up this bank account of love, and that your attention and interactions aren't solely around trying to logistically get things done or to discipline them.
Yes.
In terms of unconditional love, I think, again, that's where, when I can make boundaries from a sane, healthy, grounded, loving place, he feels that I'm loving him even in those boundaries. And when he's having a meltdown, or, we recently had kind of a big issue come up that I won't share the details of, but I remember looking at him, instead of getting angry, I said, I trust your good heart. I trust you. I love you. I know that you're going to make the wise choice next time. And I'm not even going to get mad at you. There's no, the consequence is how your heart feels right now. That's the consequence. And I love you. And nothing will take away this love. Nothing you could do. And I remember he looked at me and he had tears in his eyes, and it was just, you could feel that he understood. And that he also felt the pain, the remorse of what he had done. And I also like to bring this up, because when I say that shame is not helpful, I want to differentiate between shame and healthy remorse. And I do think it's important for us to actually feel the pain of our missteps, and not in a way that I'm bad or something's wrong with me, or in a hopeless way of I'm always going to be like this, but in a way that says, I see clearly. I see clearly, with my wisdom and my compassion, and I don't want to choose that again. You know, there's a wonderful phrase we use in the book that Tara Brach taught me, which is, it's not my fault and I'm responsible. Okay, so it's not my fault. Causes and conditions led me to this place. You know, my upbringing, my genetics, my culture. Like, it's not my fault. But as soon as you see it, I'm responsible. I'm responsible to not let that happen again.
Wow. Wow. I mean, because that's, I love that. I love that, Shauna, because exactly. It's like that's exactly what I talk to moms about, because it's like when we're triggered, it's not like we're choosing. It's not like we're like, hey, I think I'm going to lose my stuff at my kid today, and that's going to be a great decision. You know,
right.
Like we're just,
and it's not like, I mean, if you think about, how do you feel after yelling at your child? You feel awful, just awful. And how do you feel when things are loving and smooth? It's like, I'm like on top of the world. I mean, I've called my mom and I've been like, oh my God, I'm so happy right now. And she's like, what happened? And I'm like, well, I got Jackson, dressed, fed him breakfast, got him to school on time, and like nothing bad happened. She's like, that's a good day. There's this sense of like all's right with the world when your children are happy and healthy. And it's excruciating when things are challenging between them. And so what you have to say to yourself is, I'm not choosing this. This isn't who I want to be. I can't beat myself up about it. Like, I was exhausted. There were reasons why this happened, but now what? What's my next step? And what I find is, when I do that, then we come back together more easily and more quickly. But when I sit and I stew in my self-judgment and my shame, that's taking my energy away from him. It's not helping him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you can't be, you can't, if love is attention, I mean, honestly, like, that's what love feels like, is loving attention. And if that's what it is, when we're stewing in our stuff, we can't give that at all. I love that. It's not my fault and I'm responsible. I really invite you, the listener, to wrap your head around that one. That is going to be, I'm going to be pondering that, I think, for a few days, Shauna. I want to be respectful of your time, and I love your work, and I think I'll probably be sharing maybe more of insights that I have looking at this book and as I go along. But I want, thinking about the person, the listener who is maybe at a place with their child where they're starting to go down the path of threatening and yelling, and it doesn't feel good, and they want to change. What might you say to that listener?
I would say to put your hand on your heart and feel your own good intention, your own purity of heart. Feel how much you love your child, and how this consequences and punishment is coming out of your own anxiety and fear and exhaustion and overwhelm. And so the first thing to do is really just hold yourself with compassion, and to remember who you truly are and what your deepest intentions are. And to trust that from that deeper place, the wisdom of how to respond to your child when they're in pain or they're struggling will be much more effective. But it starts with first coming back to yourself and really trusting yourself. And I genuinely believe that I'm not really teaching anyone anything, that all these teachings are just reminders of what we already know. That this wisdom's already right here if we can listen.
Yeah. Yeah. If we can slow down enough to listen, if we can. I think what you were talking about earlier, that idea when you were saying to your son, I trust your good heart. You were saying, you were basically dropping yourself out of the fear of you're taking yourself out of that fear and going into this place of like, back to trust. Like, I trust you. I see you. I know you're good. And I think I kind of see that's what you're saying to moms and
To
listeners
yourself.
is,
Exactly.
yeah,
Do that for yourself, that,
yeah,
that how we see ourselves completely impacts how we be in the world. They did that. I don't know if it's a wonderful study, but very, very important study about the Pygmalion effect, and how people see us impacts kind of what happens. And the teachers who they had the students take exams, and they faked their scores. So the teachers were told, these students are very bright and you're most brilliant students, and these students they're really problematic and have some learning disabilities. And then 1 year later, they gave the students the test again. And those students who the teacher thought were bright scored much higher than the students who the teacher thought weren't bright, even though in reality there was no difference between them. So just being with a teacher who believed in you for a year increased your scores. Now, the teacher is only with you a couple hours a day. You're with yourself 24 hours a day. So you can imagine the stories you tell about yourself, what you think about yourself, how deeply they're going to impact you over the years.
yes, yes.
If we go back to reminding ourselves, I love my child, right? That's what I go back to every day. I'm like, man, I'm not perfect, but I really love him. I love Jackson, and I have a little sticker on my computer that says Jackson is precious. And, and my friend was like, why do you need to remind yourself of that? And I'm like, sometimes I get caught up in my work, and I need to have those physical reminders of what's true. And as soon as I see it, I'm like, of course, this is infinitely more important than whatever I'm doing right here. But we forget really easily, and we don't need to shame ourselves for forgetting. And it doesn't mean that we don't love our children. It just means we need support and remembering.
Yes. Yes. Yay. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Shauna, for helping us remember, helping spread that message. I really appreciate your work. I really appreciate the TED Talk's amazing. Everyone should watch it. I really appreciate Mindful Discipline. It's definitely going to get a place of honor on my shelf, and probably going to work its way into the work that I share. You're sharing your voice, and you're sharing so honestly and beautifully and clearly, and bringing this to the world is rippling out wide, and I can't express my appreciation enough.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you. This has been a pleasure for me too. And I appreciate your work in the world and how you're able to kind of synthesize and spread this message into a much larger community. So thank you.
Wow. Isn't Shauna amazing? I love what she said about shame actually preventing us from making the changes that we want to make, and instead kindness releases dopamine and turns on the learning centers of the brain. That is so, so vital for us. And that idea of sovereignty and power and what you practice grows stronger. So, so good. So I love, love, love this. Thank you so much, Shauna. We have a couple more things coming up for you in this special episode, special 100th episode. Yay! I've got my daughters are going to see us out. They've got, and you're going to get a little snippet of our daily life on our third snow day in 7 days. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, before you get to hear my girls, though, I want to turn it over to a listener, a friend, and a participant in the Mindful Parenting course. And also, she might get on the podcast sometime later this year because she got something cool to say about simplifying too, as well. So here we go.
Hi, this is Jeannie, and I took Hunter's Mindful Parenting course last year and also was at her live retreat. And I would say that the Mindful Parenting course has dramatically changed my relationship with my older daughter, especially because I feel like I'm much better at listening to her needs and listening in a way where she really feels heard, not just sort of listening and then putting what I want her to do after it. So I feel like our relationship has gotten a lot better since the Mindful Parenting course, and we're a lot closer and just having a lot of more quality discussion about when we both want different things, which is just a part of life. The other thing I did was I was at Hunter's Live retreat last year, and it was so beautiful there. It was at the Winterthur estate, and it ended up pouring rain outside, and we had this warm, cozy group of mamas inside. And it was just the perfect day to like spend some time on ourselves and really hear each other and be there for each other. And I felt like I got some wonderful insights from Hunter, as well as a lot of support from the other women. I would highly, highly recommend that retreat. Everybody who left, like at the end, she was asking people what they got out of it, and everybody was so glad they did it. It was just a beautiful and calm day to connect with other mothers, and it was just wonderful. So anyway, I'm really grateful for both of those experiences. I'm also grateful for the podcast, and I just want to say thank you, Hunter, for all of your work. Bye.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. I really appreciate those kind words. So great. Thank you so much. If you want to, perhaps Jeannie will be there. I think she might be, and meet me. And also Anna is our special guest speaker. Come to the Mindful Mama Day-Long Retreat on April 14th. And it's in Wilmington, Delaware at the Winterthur Museum and Country Estate. It is so beautiful. Wait till you see the beautiful pictures of this place on our page for Winterthur. And you can find that at mindfulmamamentor.com. Check out events to find the page for this retreat, and it will be limited in number, so check it out and register now. And early bird pricing, I think, will be until February of 2018. So if you're listening now, go ahead and jump on that now while you're excited about it, so that you can get the early bird pricing, and then we can hang out, we can chat. It would be great to connect with you in person, and these retreats can really make a big difference in people's lives. People have told me they're life-changing, wonderful. You get to really relax. We'll do deep relaxation. We'll talk about mindfulness. We'll talk about communication with your kids. It can really, when you take time out of your life, you go away, you can really immerse yourself and relax. And I want the retreat to be, it will be a really all-encompassing experience. So we are giving you lunch and snacks. So you just show up and you are taken care of. This is what I want for you. So go ahead and check that out at mindfulmamamentor.com under events. And I think, coming up in the next episode, I just want to let you know that Carla, my friend Carla, will be back, and we will be talking about your resolutions and how to really make change. And it's interesting because it adds to a lot of what Shauna said here and the research she said here. So we're going to talk about that next week on the podcast. So I will see you then. And I want to thank my dear husband for the music. And I just want to send you lots of love, lots of appreciation, my friend. I'm so glad you're here with me on this parenting journey. It's so hard. I mean, it brings up so much. It digs at us in this really, really deep and lasting way. And we need to come together. Like, that's what we need to do as women. Come together as parents, come together and support each other and hold each other up, hold our hands and be real and be honest. And I hope that's what this podcast is doing for you, because it's really what I really care about. And I really care about you. And I know that your peace and happiness and groundedness, it makes a difference for everyone. It makes a difference for me, makes a difference for your kids, for my kids. It really makes a difference in this world, because what happens in this micro level of the family truly ripples out into the macro level. So don't ever forget that. And now, thank you for being here for my 100th episode. Yay! I hope we'll have many, many more. And let my daughters and this little snippet of our daily life take us out.
What is that?
Yes, you do. I'm recording.
Why?
That means we don't have to unload the dirty dishes.
Can you say thank you for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast for me?
Why?
Okay.
So I can put it on the podcast?
I'll do it.
Thank you for listening.
No, not like that. Come on. Think about it. Grammy's going to be listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for
Here, sorry, you say it.
Thank you for listening. I am Alexa. Thank you for listening. Alexa.
Okay, sorry. Do you want to say thanks for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast?
Say. Ha! Go!
Honey, that's going to hurt people's ears.
Thank you for listening to the Mindful Mom. Thank you for listening to the Mindful.
Come on, honey.
Thank you for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast.
I am a robot. Goodbye.